Morning, everybody. This is our November 2023 SFMS user group. We're excited to have you here. I have already asked whose first user group this was, and we're going to count those up so we can get going because we have a full agenda this morning. All right, today's agenda. FBS SFMS updates. We want to walk you through some changes. We have Workday Payroll update, SharePoint update, the SFMS Calendar, clearing Document Supported GL accounts, DAFM 348, the encumbrance, pre-encumbrance liquidation, because we are at Biennium end, the DAFJ 1651, which is Biennium close. We will walk you through that. DAFR highlight. Today, our highlight is the agency operating statement, so DAFR 6610. The other question of the morning is, has anybody ran that or looked at that report? DAFR 6610. Do you use it on a regular basis? And if you can put that in the chat, that would be great. So then our presenter will know what kind of audience they're looking at. Okay. Then we have the D23 fund request updates, Treasury fund requests, and then the 1099 process that SFMS does for our vendors. So we have a couple of screen highlights like we do at all of our user groups. So we have the 44 single payment cancellation and the 47 payment control table status. And then we have Aaron Wallace to walk us through the Datamart Calendar. All right, so a couple of updates on our end that we want to share with everybody is we have our new agency support analyst, so Scott Wood, and we have his phone number, is here and is ready as of October 1st to help with agency questions. So if you are one of Scott's agencies, can you let me know if you're here? And so then that allows Scott to maybe, connect some names and all of that stuff. So we're very excited to have Scott with us. And he will be, in contact with you as he has been already all of October. So welcome, Scott. And then there was a change. So we all know Trudy retired August 31st. And so I became the FBS administrator as of July 1st. So my role is changing at DAS. And we will be hiring a new SFMS manager. I'm actually opening up that position. It could be this week already. So if anybody's interested, we will be hiring or recruiting for a new SFMS manager. Okay. And then upcoming SFMS trainings. We have a couple here in the next, short time frame. So 1099 tax forms, tax year 2023, and that training is going to be December 5th. So the staff involved with vendors and all of the 1099 reporting, you will have some work to do in December to make sure that the forms that we send out in January and March are correct and accurate to the best of our abilities. So that's happening December 5th. And then our next user group will be February 6th. And I invite all of you guys to attend. We always have different jobs and stuff that we want to walk you through because we only meet with you 3 times a year, February, May, and November. And there's a lot happening for us. So we like to try to just get as much information out to you as possible. And then we have a vendor training. So Tammy always does our vendor training. So if you have new staff that need to set up vendors in SFMS, please make sure that they attend Tammy's training and get all their questions answered. Because if you're new and you're trying to set something up, there's a lot of different information that the vendor screen provides that we want to make sure you know exactly how to enter the information. And then we're excited because we have not done a direct deposit training in a couple of years. So we will be having the first one on February 22nd. And this is important, again, for the people that are setting up vendors, but the vendor wants to get paid via direct deposit. So we work the banking information in our office, but we have a lot of contact with the agencies when they want to set up vendors. And there's some complexities when you have mail codes. So we're having that training February 22nd. We're hoping to record the trainings in case you need to go back to them. And then the last update is our SFMS customer service survey of 2023. So one more time, has everybody completed the survey? We sent it out, I think, a couple weeks ago, and we're just hoping it's a 5-minute survey. It's going to be very helpful for the new SFMS manager to just kind of have that baseline as they're coming in, because we work really hard to provide, timely, accurate information to you. And so we want to make sure that you let us know, like, what could we be doing better? So just some feedback, and it takes 5 minutes, and we're going to send the reminder out in case, it got lost in your emails and stuff. So we would appreciate if you just take 5 minutes and let us know how we're doing. I think it'll be very helpful. And up next, we have Jennifer that's going to walk us through the Workday payroll updates.
Hi, everyone. Loretta, next slide. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the interface file to SFMA. So we've talked about this every time since a little before going live, but there are going to be changes to the current document numbers, the payroll run identifier for all SFMS transaction codes. So on the T code 850, for example, even years, which is going to be in January, we are going to be switching to an alpha for the run character. So it'd be PA, your agency number, and an example of 12A or B for run 2. Right now, we're still in odd years, and there's a few reasons we did this. Partially because HEM every few years caused a hiccup in June when HEM happened in the same month as the previous, in the same fiscal year as the previous July because of when it was cut. And also the T code 851, because we've now got it going, being dated for the date of the check. So if you did some off-cycle checks, you're going to see more than one T code 851. So actually, I think that's more on our side, but yeah. But it helps with all of that, so it just makes a smoother process. Next slide. Okay, so issues that we had in January through March on the payroll files. We had some delayed interface files from Workday. We haven't seen that in a while, so that seems to be resolved. 2210 doubled. 3210 doubled. The majority of those corrections processed on March run 1, with additional corrections processing March run 2 through June run 1. If there were some corrections that didn't process through the system, they were manually processed on 824 using document PA agency number 029. And we are working with Workday to get that data into OB. So corrections already processed automatically through the system can be found in OB under PERS pension correction, central payroll use only. So they're still under 3210. It's just the example on the screen that's fairly small, sorry, but it does show the PERS pension correction, central payroll use. Next slide. Some other issues that we had was we also had a multiplier issue, which affected 3210 and 3263. Yes, 3210 was in the prior issue as well. And it was January run 2 and February run 1. They were all retro transactions. Data was provided to the affected agencies. However, we did also find that some additional agencies' objects could have been affected. We did send notification to agencies on 10/6 with how to pull the detail on agency objects if you checked in with us, which we were trying to track who wanted to look a little further. So yeah. SFMS, all accounting event to OB transactions in on the Workday CECD. We do know there's some differences. We are working on those. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them were cleaned up as of March Run 2. We've figured out what was triggering some of those differences. Some of the older differences, we're also working on figuring out why and resolving that. And then we also have some issues with Agency Object 9999, and we are working with Workday to get that data cleaned up in OB as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so you may have seen our emails about Workday data not sent to SFMA. So what is happening is the data processed for a month after Payroll Run 1 has completed. So primarily cancellations, manual checks prior to month end. So a good example of this would be in the current month. I forget when they're actually, let's go to October. So October, we loaded the file from Workday on the 27th. If there were any manual checks on the 30th or 31st, those would not necessarily get picked up in Run 2. Or if there were cancellations, those wouldn't get picked up. So we did the first correction December through June. That was processed on September 1st with an effective date of August 1st and a report effective date in OB of 9/1. We're going to be doing quarterly corrections. You already saw the second one, which is July through September, which was processed on October 11th, effective dated 9/30. And with a report effective date in OB of 10/10. Going forward, we're tentatively planning on processing these quarterly. The timing will coincide with the end of quarter like it did for the July through September. So January will have an effective date of 12/31. With the report effective date in OB, we are going to have it different than Payroll Run 2 of month closing, which was a mistake we did. We realized we shouldn't have done it the same date for the previous quarter. Also, Agency Object 9999, August Payroll Run 2. We're working on getting that cleaned up in OB and getting those transactions processed. I think we actually received those I think late last week. So we're going to be getting those in shortly. Next slide. Workday Retro. So this is on labor costing, the OPEs. So we're talking about the Workday Retro Cost Override System Resolution. Seth sent out an email to all agencies on the 18th of October. We had a meeting to review the reports and answer any questions on the 25th. That meeting was recorded. And my understanding is they're doing weekly meetings as well, so that you can log on to if you've got questions. So phase 1 is a data cleanup of March through to June 2023. Agencies need to review that data and approve that data by November 30th for the agency to load. They are not automatically going to load every agency. If you know that your agency isn't going to load anything, you can let them know. But if you're thinking you might want to, then you need to review it and get it approved by the 30th. So no data will be loaded to SFMA from March to June without agency approval. The next phase, phase 2, is to test and validate scenarios to implement automated process. Both payroll and finance SME participation is needed. So especially if you've got some scenarios, some complex ones, they want to know about those so that they can identify those to test. If you've got questions about it, or if you've reviewed your data and want to approve it, or your agency is not processing, please contact both Rhonda Bachman and Deanna Harris. Their emails are in the slide. Other issues that we're working on. So we're working on hours, specifically on costing overrides. We've realized that the hours in CECD do not match the hours submitted to SFMA. And so we're looking into that with them and allocating costing overrides. The system is over allocating some of those costing overrides. So let's see. Additionally, things that we're working on are Workday payroll transactions paid directly out of SFMA with T code 287. We want agencies to identify any remaining T code 287 transactions that have not been cleared in the deposit liability account. If you have any questions on that, I think Liz can help you with that. Is that correct, Liz?
Yes, if there's questions on that, you can reach out to me. And I think we're doing some analysis, so I may reach out to a few agencies if I have questions.
Perfect. And you'll want to work with your payroll partners to make sure those transactions are correct in Workday and that you've been reimbursed by OSPS. Next slide. Okay, thanks. Agency accounting issues for Workday payroll. So as you find issues, first, of course, your first line of defense is to work with your agency payroll partner, confirm that it's a system issue or if it's maybe a data entry error. We are still seeing some data entry errors. So an employee picks the wrong cost override, one that's not applicable for your agency. That can happen. So if you confirm that it is not a data entry error, please submit a case in Workday. And you can type case into the search bar within Workday and click on create case. You'll want to add any necessary documentation, including examples. Great information for them is ORID and a month and run. And this is new. We are also asking you to email the info and the case number to us at SFMS Payroll Data at DAS. And this is going to help SFMS track and monitor progress on Workday issues that our accounting staff within the agencies are having. And so this will help us advocate for you because we have heard a few instances where we're not hearing about it, we're not advocating for you because we don't know about it. And so we want to help you in that. Next slide. You've all seen this very similar slide previously. This is OB for Workday data dates. I moved it down in the year since we are later in the year. This is based on the Workday processing calendar. The link is currently the 2023 one. I did see that yesterday they emailed out through the OSPS announcements email a link within Workday to the 2024 calendar. So we'll see an updated slide on the next one, or next meeting. So if you have any questions, let me know. Anything I can answer in the chat.
So that concludes the Workday payroll section of our meeting. I do not see any questions in the chat, but before we move on to the next section of our meeting, does anybody have any questions on what we just covered? Not seeing anything in the chat, so we're going to move on to the next section. Oh, I see a question.
PCA corrections feed over to Workday from SFMA. Are you talking the OPE? In general, we have a few that don't feed over. If you can email me sort of some details, again, a great ORID, and send it to the email that we, the shared email that we talked about, the SFMS payroll, and ORID and run just some example stuff, information. So
Jenny
link for the
saying,
calendar
yep.
didn't work. I'm wondering if it changed with the new website. I did not check it, so that could be the case. I do have one. I will put the I have it tagged in my Chrome, so I will put the updated link because I just looked at it this morning, I think, in the chat.
Okay, any other questions?
I don't see any, so I think next slide. Dash SharePoint update with Liz.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. My name is Liz Schultz. Unfortunately, Julie Tacchini can't join us today, so I'm going to be presenting these slides on her behalf. DAS SharePoint, we recently had an update to the DAS website. So you may have noticed if you've gone out to the DAS website, the SFMS website, there's some changes. And this was due to an upgrade of SharePoint. The reason for the upgrade was to improve accessibility, add some additional functions, and create a fresh and cohesive look. Next slide, please. So if you go out to our SFMS homepage, if you haven't seen our SFMS homepage, I recommend checking it out. We have a lot of resources and information for agencies available on there. But you'll see some new page menus. It's still the same information we had in the previous website. It's just organized a little bit differently. Next slide, please. So when you navigate through these different menus, you may see some of that new SharePoint functionality. One is how lists are shown in the website. So we have a lot of resources. One example is our DAFR reports. We have a lot of PDFs that give you more detail about each of those requestable reports you can order. You have the ability with this SharePoint upgrade to now search for information, to sort, to filter. You can export information and choose how many results are going to display per page. Next slide. We also have available on a couple of screens. If you go to our menu for the R-Stars training manual, I know it says R-Stars training manual twice on this slide. The other page would be the R-Stars data entry guide. If you go to those pages on our SFMS website, you'll see a button towards the top that says topic and screens list. And if you click on that, that can be really useful. It brings you to an index that lists all topics alphabetically. If you scroll to the bottom, it will show you a list of specific R-Stars screens. So if you're trying to quickly look up reference information, you can use that topic and screens list to try to find the information you need more quickly. Also on our website, if you look at the top bar up there, we have the Contact Us dropdown. If you select the topical and staff directory, you'll see all of the SFMS staff contact information organized by what type of questions they can help you with. There's also a link to get to the state employee search. So not a lot of changes, just kind of changes how the website looks. All the same information is there. Any questions on the SFMS website or the SharePoint upgrade? I'm not seeing any. If there are questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I can address them for you. If you can't find information you used to be able to find on the website, you're not sure where it went, contact your SFMS analyst. We can help point you to that information.
Michelle has a
Michelle.
question, Liz.
Thank
She's
you.
asking if we find broken links, who do we contact?
Please contact Julie Tacchini. Julie Tacchini manages the SharePoint website. So if you find a link that's broken, please let us know so we can get that corrected. Thank you, Michelle. All right. So the next topic I'm going to go over with you briefly is the SFMS calendar. So for those people new to our user groups, or maybe you're new to using R-Stars or new to the state, SFMS prepares each calendar year the SFMS calendar. It's on our website. I have a slide later that shows you where you can find it on our website. We also send out a notice to SFMS News once it's available. And this is a really useful tool. I hope most people are familiar with our SFMS calendar, but if you haven't, I would recommend checking it out. It helps keep track of key dates in SFMA and when we do trainings. So on this calendar, you can find all of the closing deadlines for fiscal month end, fiscal year end, biennium close. We also have dates when Workday Payroll Run 1 and Run 2 will occur. We have the cutoff deadlines, when the transactions are going to be loaded. We load the payroll transactions first. They sit on the 5:30 screen for a day, and then they post. So you can find all of those dates on our SFMS calendar. We also have the system jobs that we run. We have a lot of different jobs we're running to maintain the system. We have weekly report runs. If you're ordering DAFR reports, we do them a little bit more frequently during month 13. All of those dates will be listed on the calendar of when you can order reports. For those agencies that use cost allocation, that's a feature in SFMA. We have a few agencies, I think maybe 4 currently, that are using it. We have all of the proof and post run deadlines for each month on our calendar. We have annual deadlines for the 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC forms of when agencies need to review information and when we're going to be sending out those forms. We have information on when we're running our general ledger close program and our annual and biennial system roles, archives, and purges. Training dates are also listed on there, so it's a really good resource. We do have the 2024 calendar on our website right now, the PDF version. We haven't emailed it out on SFMS News just yet. We're waiting to have the Outlook version completed. This screen print is showing where the 2023 SFMA calendar can be found, but you can find the 2024 calendar in the same place. It's in the right-hand bottom corner of the main page of our website. So you can go on, you can open up the PDF calendar and see all the dates so you can plan ahead for calendar year 2024. We will have an Outlook version available as well, and then we'll send out a notice to SFMS News once that's available for you. And if you haven't signed up for SFMS News, you can do that on our website. SFMS News is our distribution list. We use it to send out important notices on the system, information about upcoming trainings, those sorts of things. So you can subscribe to that from our website as well. Any questions on the SFMS calendar?
I'm not seeing any questions yet in the chat, Liz. Let's maybe hold off and see if we.
Okay.
Oh, I think we're good.
Sounds good. So I'm going to go through another topic. I know you've heard from me quite a bit, and I've got a few more after the break to talk to you about. But this topic we're going to discuss is about biennium close. And if you looked at our agenda today, there's several topics related to biennium close. The first that I'm going to cover is clearing document supported GL accounts. So if you've attended SFMS user trainings before biennium close in the past, this training should be pretty familiar. This is something we do every 2 years, so it's good to have a refresher. If you are newer to the state, you haven't gone through a biennium close process, I'm going to be covering a lot of information today. And just know that these slides are going to be available for you later if you need to look at it. We have references to where you can find more information on our website. And your SFMS analyst is going to be partnering with you to give you the information you need to help move these forward and monitoring to make sure this work gets completed. So don't feel like you have to absorb everything right now, but I want to give you a lot of information so you can also use these slides as a tool when you're actually doing this work. So some background, we have appropriation years every 2 years. We're coming to the official close for appropriation year 2023, and there's several things we need to do in the R-Star system to close out the biennium. So some background, the state's budget is approved on a biennial basis. So AY23 spans from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2023. And AY25 spans from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2025. So even though those AYs are ending in June, we have a 6-month closeout period in SFMA. So AY23, the period ended June 30th, 2023, but it is still available to make entries in SFMA for corrections or for transactions that relate to activity that occurred before June 30. Until the end of December in SFMA. So right now we have 2 bienniums open. We have AY23 open and AY25. So before the end of December, agencies must review all of their AY23 document supported general ledger account balances. Next slide. And what I mean by document supported general ledger accounts are these specific general ledgers. So anything that's accounts receivable that's reported to GL 0501, 0543, 0547, 0574. We have some other non-receivables for unreimbursed advances, unearned revenue, and deposit liability, and then encumbrances for those agencies that encumber. GL 2735. I don't think anybody uses pre-encumbrances. We have that GL in our system, but I don't see any agencies using it. So what I mean by document supported transactions, another term I'm going to be mentioning, is transactions that are tracked on the 64 screen. So all of those GLs on the previous slide, if you record a transaction to that GL, it's going to create a record on the 64 screen. So accounts receivable is the most common that we see here. You've created an invoice. It's going to be tracked on the 64 screen so you can see the total document balance, any adjustments or liquidations against it, and it tracks that through the life of the document. So document supported is those documents on the 64 screen. If those were set up in AY23, we need to move them to AY25 for the next biennium. Next slide. So as far as what agencies need to do for this process, they need to review all their document supported general ledger account balances and take appropriate action prior to the end of December. So there's a couple different options. The first, if it's still a valid document, you may need to just reclassify the AY23 balance to AY25. The other option is you may need to adjust that balance to 0. Maybe you encumbered something in AY23, it's no longer valid, and you just need to reduce that encumbrance balance to 0. The third is maybe it's eligible for write-off. Maybe you have an invoice out there, you've referred to the OAM guidelines, followed all the steps to be able to collect on it, and are ready to write it off. So if you needed to do that, you would want to do that write-off before the close of AY23. So if you reclassify the balance, the entries will net to 0 in the current fiscal year. There's not any financial statement impact. If you're making an adjustment that's not going to net to 0 in the current fiscal year, you may need to reach out to your STARS analyst if a prior period adjustment is needed. So if you had to adjust an invoice to 0 and it was reported in your fiscal year 23 year end, you might need to see if there's a need for any prior period adjustment for that. So why do we need to do this process? Why do we need to clear these AY23 balances and reestablish them in AY25? So agencies should move any general fund accounts receivable forward to the new biennium if receivables are not collected by June 30th at the end of the biennium. And this is specific to general fund. You can find more information about this in the Oregon Accounting Manual. We have a reference there. It's in Chapter 20, where it talks about these budgetary requirements for general fund accounts receivable. Any of those balances should be zero by June month end close and move the balances forward to AY25 or write off if appropriate. Other AY23 document supported balances, so things that aren't general fund, if they're other funds or federal funds, they must be zeroed out by December 31 when the appropriations lapse. Any balances should be moved forward to AY25 or adjusted or written off if appropriate. So we're trying to make sure all this activity is recorded in the correct biennium. That's why we need to clear these out in AY23 to close out the biennium. Next slide, please. It's important to reclassify these remaining document supported GL balances from the closed appropriation year to the open appropriation year. Also for a technical reason in SFMA, when you're entering transactions that reference that supported document on the 64 screen, it's looking back to see what coding was used originally. So it needs to be the open AY because it can't post to the old AY. If this isn't completed, if these aren't cleared out and moved to AY25 before the end of December, as an RStars user, you're going to run into errors when you're attempting to post document supported transactions if the reference document was established in a closed appropriation year. And then you're going to have to reach out to your SFMS analyst to resolve it. So we're monitoring this. We're trying to help agencies make sure they get everything moved over. Next slide. So for the accounts receivable documents, those are those 4 GLs that are listed at the top of the slide. Before the appropriation year ends, all accounts receivable documents must be zeroed out. Any general fund AR should have been already zeroed out at the end of June, and then all other ARs must be zeroed out by the end of December. And we have a link on here to the desk manual. The SFMS desk manual is available on the SFMS website. There's a chapter called Rev 2 that goes through all of this process in detail with T codes. In these next few slides, I'm going to go through a couple examples that are in that document, but that document has more complete guidance. So if there's a specific situation you're looking for, that would be the place to go. So to identify your outstanding AY23 AR balances, we do have a DAFR report that you can order to assist with this. It's DAFR 9750, the Accounts Receivable Document Status Report. And if you order this report, it'll show you by document number all the documents that have an outstanding balance that need to be addressed for AY23. So, to order this report, you would order it on the 91 screen. We've got some information here on what you would enter on that 91 report request screen. So you're going to put in the report ID. You want to make sure it's limited to appropriation year 23. You want to run it as of the current month. And then the frequency is just the date that you want to run that report. You can order these on Fridays, these DAFR reports, and then it would be available for you the following Monday. And then you just want to input your agency in the special selects section. So once you've ordered that report, you want to group your ARs by T code to kind of what category are they in. We have transfer in ARs, reduction of expense ARs. You could have a negative AR, deposit liability, or other receivables. And our desk manual kind of walks you through these categories and gives you the T codes on how you would adjust or reclassify these into AY25 for each of those categories. Next slide. So for a transfer in AR document before the end of December, you want to either collect it with T code 173, or you can adjust it to 0 with T code 171R. then you would establish an AY25 with T code 109 or T code 174. Or if it meets all the criteria in the OAM to be written off, you would follow those guidelines in the OAM to do that. Next slide. So here are some screenshots, and these same screenshots appear in the desk manual, but I just kind of wanted to walk you through what that would look like on the transaction entry screens. So here's our first example. It's an AR document. This is the 84 screen showing the AR document. It's set up with T code 109 in AY23, and we've got the document number highlighted on the slide. Next slide. So this is a document supported transaction that you can look up on the 64 screen. If you input that document on the 64 screen, you can see this document has a current outstanding balance of $240,000 that we need to address for AY23 close. Next slide. So the first thing we're going to do in this case is we're going to adjust the AR to 0 in AY23. We're going to move it forward to AY25. So this is what that entry would look like. You would enter a current document number, a new current document number. You can see the reference document is that AR 002961 that we were looking at. T code 171 with the R reverse indicator is what you would enter, and you would enter it in AY23 to zero out this AR. Next slide. After doing that, you can see on the 64 screen that this document balance is 0, as we would expect. Next slide. So this receivable is still valid. We want to set it up in AY25. We would put in our current document number. We would add our reference document number there, setting it up with T code 109. And to keep appropriate aging for this invoice, you want to use the same due date as the original invoice used. You don't want to just use the current date. Otherwise, you're not going to have accurate aging in the system. And then when you record this, you would use AY25. Next slide. And now we can see we've got this new document number, the AR 2963001, set up with the $240,000 balance. So note on this, it's the new document number that was used. It's not the reference document. There's a brand new invoice number assigned when we reclassified it to AY25. Reduction of expense ARs. For these, you can either collect them with T code 137, adjust them to 0 with T code 136R, and reestablish with T code 199. Please note, for reduction of expense, the Oregon Accounting Manual Budgetary Policy, Chapter 20, you can only record reduction of expense within the same AY. So if you're having to reclassify a reduction of expense AR into the new AY, you need to reclassify it as revenue. It can no longer be a reduction of expense since it crosses bienniums. Or you can have the option of writing it off if you've met all of the OAM guidelines. Next slide. Negative accounts receivable. There's a couple options here depending on what T code you use to set up that negative accounts receivable balance. So you can collect it with either T code 176R or T code 178R. You can adjust it to 0 with T code 107 or T code 110. And then you can return funds with an expenditure T code in AY25. So if this is a negative accounts receivable and funds are actually due back, you can use an expenditure T code to return those. Next slide. Deposit liability ARs, those are collected with T code 160, adjusted with T code 123R, and then established in AY25 with T code 120. So a couple of different options. It does take some time, so make sure you're pulling those reports. I would recommend getting started on this process now to make sure that you've got everything completed before the end of December, because you need to see how these ARs were set up, and you need to research them to determine if they need to be adjusted or if they just need to be reclassified. Next slide, please. Other receivables, any non-general fund document supported account balances, again, you can collect them with these T codes that are on this slide, or you can adjust them to 0 with T code 118 or the regular adjustment T code and reclassify to AY25. For these other receivables, you can use T code 213 to reclassify in the new AY to keep a documented supported connection between the AYs. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through an example of this one to show you what that looks like. So here we've got an invoice AR 014255 set up with T code 199 and AY23. Next slide. We can see this document on the 64 screen. It has an outstanding balance of $1,581.75. Next slide. So we need to adjust it to 0 in AY23. So we're going to use a T code 107R with the reversal. We're going to enter that reference document in the reference document field for AY23. Next slide. Then we're going to reclassify to the new AY with T code 213. And in this case, we're going to use the next sequential suffix for the current document and reference document. So we've got our current document. We did the adjustment on current document suffix 001. This is the second line entry in that batch for current document 002. We're going to put the reference document in there, the AR 014255, but instead of entering 001, which was the current document, we're going to assign a brand new suffix that hasn't been used for this document before, 002. And then we're going to set this up with T code 213 in AY25. Since we're doing this all on the same document number, our document amount is 0 because we're just moving AYs essentially for this invoice. And again, make sure you're using the same due date to ensure proper aging. Next slide. So now that we've made that entry to adjust it to 0 in AY23 and set up a new suffix for AY25, if I go to the 64 screen and put in the AR document with suffix 001, I can see the doc balance is now 0. Next slide. And then I can see the reclassification on that second suffix 002. Now it's showing that $1,581.75 balance for AY25. Next slide. So I want to just make a caution about T code 213. It's nice that you can keep the same AR document. It's on a different suffix. But there are some pitfalls that you can run into when using this T code 213. So whenever you're using it, you want to make sure you're adding the suffix to an existing document supported document. So you're creating a brand new suffix in the reference document field that didn't exist before. Once you save T code 213, please don't go in and delete it or change it. Changing or deleting a T code 213 transaction can cause posting problems with later transactions. So you won't see it right away. The system would let you make a change to it or delete it. But then if you try to record a subsequent transaction using that same reference document, you can get some unusual errors. If a T code 213 entry is incorrectly saved, SFMS recommends releasing it and just posting another transaction to correct it rather than deleting it. And we see this every year. It's why I recommend agencies start on this process in November and get an early start on it. Sometimes we'll find out that maybe last biennium, somebody entered the T code 213 wrong, and now you're trying to roll that AR forward or adjust it to 0, and you're getting unusual error messages. If that happens, you need to reach out to your SFMS analyst, and we'll help you troubleshoot that. We might need to do a work request to clean up the transaction in the system behind the scenes, so it can take some time. All right, next slide. Non-receivable documents, that's for those GLs that are listed on this slide. These should also be zeroed out before the end of December 31st. These instructions are also all in our desk manual that's linked on this slide. Next slide. And I'm going to pause for a moment. I do see a question about T code 118. There's a question in the chat of last biennium, T code 118 was used instead of T code 107. Is it better to use T code 107? So when we're talking about adjusting, I think this is the other receivables, AR balances to 0 in AY23, you can use T code 118 to adjust those, or you can use a T code 107R. They both will impact the same GLs, so you can use either. We don't really have a preference in the desk manual. It mentions T code 118 or another adjustment T code. So if your agency has a practice that you followed in the past, I would recommend just continuing forward with that. But if you use T code 118 versus T code 107R, they're going to have the same impact. Okay. So for unreimbursed advances, if you have anything in GL 0573 that relates to AY23, these are advances that were issued with T code 223. There's some steps here that you'll need to follow to clear those out. If you've collected the money, you can use T code 150 to collect that advance, and you can record an AY23 if it's before December. If you didn't collect the money and you need to liquidate this advance, you can use T code 229 and T code 230 to reclassify it as an expenditure instead of an advance. And you can do that all in AY23. If you need to move it forward, there's a special T code pair to do that. You would use T code 434, and on that side, you would use AY23. Then you would use T code 435 with AY25. So that would, the T code 434 will liquidate it in AY23, and then we'll move it forward with T code 435 to the next biennium. And the document number that's on the 64 screen is going to change. Travel advances usually start with TA. If you reclassify it from one biennium to the other, it's going to be a BT document that you have to look up on the 64 screen. Okay, next page. Unearned revenue. You will use T code 170. If the deposit was recorded with T code 170 for these, you use T code 493 to record it as earned revenue if you've actually gone through the steps to reclassify this as revenue. If you need to move it forward, you would use T code 443 and T code 444 to do that. And you want to make sure you enter the next sequential suffix, kind of similar to the T code 213 that we talked about previously. Next slide. Deposit liabilities, anything recorded with T code 165. You can use T code 168R to adjust. You can reclass it to revenue using T code 398, 399 if it was improperly classified as a liability and now needs to be reclassified as revenue. If the money needs to be returned to the depositor, you can use T code 290. And if you need to move it forward, you would use the T code 430 and 431 combination. So there's a couple different scenarios depending on the situation for that deposit liability. Next slide. So I'll quickly go through these slides with the deposit liability. Again, here's the original entry with the deposit liability. It was set up with T code 165 and AY23. Next slide will show reclassing. So we're going to do a portion of it, we're going to reclass to revenue, and the rest we're going to move to AY25. So here's the T code 398 and 399 entries to reclassify this as revenue. And both of these are done with AY23. So we're reclassing $200 of the deposit liability to revenue with these entries. Next slide. So now we can see our balance has been reduced. It was originally $350 for this document on the 64 screen. I can see the balance type 01 shows me the original amount in the bottom left. I can see our liquidation. That was our $200 entry to reclassify a portion to revenue. And now we have $150 remaining on this document in AY23. Next slide. So for that, we're going to move it forward to AY25. So this shows the entry for that with T code 430 and 431. The 430 side of the entry uses AY23. The 431 side uses AY25. Next slide. And now we can see the document is adjusted to 0. Next slide. And then if we look at the DL document with the suffix 002, we see the balance is set up in AY25 for 150. Encumbrances, Alan is going to talk a little bit more about a job that we have that will automatically clear any encumbrances. These also need to be cleared before year end. If you want to review these before the job DAFR 348 runs, you can do that and adjust those to 0 or reestablish them in AY25. If you don't make any entries to reduce these encumbrance balances to 0 before the DAFR 348 job runs, that job will liquidate those encumbrances in the system automatically. Next slide. And I know that was a lot of information. I'm going to pause and see if we have any questions on this. And please remember to reach out to your SFMS analyst as you're working through this, because a lot of times you won't know what questions you have until you start doing those entries.
I'm not seeing any questions yet, Liz, on the chat.
Okay, if somebody has questions, you can enter them in the chat and I can respond in the chat too. So we can move forward. I think Alan is going to be up next.
And I'm going to interject. So should we take, Alan, sorry to get you, I think it's a great time right now to take a 10-minute break and we'll come back, just kind of, go walk around, get some more coffee, and then we'll be back with Alan in 10 minutes at 10:10. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Park, and I'm going to talk to you about the encumbrance and pre-encumbrance liquidation program called DAFM 348. So before we get into the presentation, I wanted to talk about some upcoming changes to AdPix. Predominantly in the past, the encumbrances and pre-encumbrances for those agencies that use that, those entries would be made in AdPix. With the introduction of Oregon buys, that activity is now transitioned over to being done in Oregon buys. So we'll be making some changes to AdPix security. So by December 29th, we will be turning off any user's AdPix security that enables data entry. And after December 29th, all users will have view-only access to AdPix. Because AdPix has some AY25 posted transactions, it will remain available for viewing until AY25 is closed, so in December of 2025. Next slide, please. So the objectives of DAFM 348 are to liquidate pre-encumbrances and encumbrances in RStars. There's also a job called PCHB 0348 that cancels requisitions and purchase orders in AdPix. And for ease of conversation, we refer to both jobs together in this presentation as DAFM 348. Next slide, please. Okay, this liquidation program runs every 2 years before the biennium close, and this year it is scheduled for Monday, December 11th. Next slide. Now, the Oregon Accounting Manual, Chapter 20, defines pre-encumbrances and encumbrances. A pre-encumbrance represents the intent to purchase goods or services. An encumbrance represents a formal commitment to purchase goods or services within the current biennium. Next slide. So this OAM goes on to say that to charge obligations against a prior biennial appropriation, the service must be performed or supplies must be received by June 30th, and the vendor must be paid by December 31st. If at the end of a biennium, goods or services for an encumbered spending commitment have not been received by June 30th, you should cancel the encumbrance or the remaining balance of the encumbrance for partially fulfilled contracts and reestablish it in the new biennium. Next slide. What records qualify to be canceled by this program? The comptroller GL on the transaction must be either 2735, which is encumbrance, or 2736, pre-encumbrance. Now, as Liz mentioned previously, pre-encumbrances were very rarely used in RStars or AdPix, but just in case there are any, this job is set up to handle that. So the other qualifying thing, the appropriation number must have an effective end date on the RStars 20 profile that is less than January 1 of 2024. The document and the suffix must have a 0 balance and no close date, or it must have a positive balance on the document financial table, the 64 screen. Next slide, please. So records meeting this criteria will be interfaced to RStars, and any purchase orders or requisitions in AdPix that interfaced to RStars are also canceled. The interface records will process with the nightly batch cycle on Monday, December 11th. The following morning, any errors will hold on the agency's 5:30 screen. Next slide. So agency responsibilities. On or before December 11th, you must make sure that your 25 profile for fiscal year 24 reflects that December is open so that any entries can post. So in other words, by that date, you cannot show last month closed of 06 because any transactions would error if it was set that way. So it must be 05 or less for fiscal year 24. You will be able to view the posted transactions from the program on either the DAFR 2251 or the DAFR 2261 control reports each night after the transactions post. Next slide, please. So you need to make sure that you have someone with an active user class 49 to be able to make corrections to the transactions and to release the batches until all transactions post. If an error is caused by an agency-controlled profile, for example, PCA or index, those profiles will need to be temporarily modified in order to clear the transactions. If any appropriation number profiles have an effective end date of less than December 31st, 2023, those transactions will reflect an error of E5B, invalid effective date /20 date. So for those types of errors, please contact your SFMS agency analyst. Those will need to be fixed centrally. Next slide. Any transactions that error due to an inactive vendor will be handled centrally. Please email any vendor activation requests to the vendor desk using the normal vendor activation process. The vendor desk email is sfms.1.vendor@das.oregon.gov. Next slide, please. So the 5:30 screen will be available Tuesday morning, December 12th, but please do not go into the Y batches. That's what these batches, these transactions generate in a batch type Y. Please do not go into the Y batches until we've completed our program validation, and we will send out an SFMS news once that validation is complete. Next slide. And if you have any questions with the errored transactions, please contact either myself or your assigned SFMS agency analyst, and their contact information is listed here. And does anybody have any questions right now?
I do not see any questions in the chat, Alan. I think we are going to move on to the next section of the meeting.
Thank you. I believe Liz is back up again.
Hi again. I've got two more topics to cover on behalf of Julie. This first one is the DAFJ 1651 Biennium close. I think it's the last topic we have today on end of Biennium. So DAFJ 1651, this is the system job that runs in SFMA to actually close out the biennium at the end of December. So just to kind of give you some background, we have a couple jobs that feed into this. In August is when we run our fiscal year end close program. This is what closes out nominal GL balances into equity accounts. We do that every single year after fiscal year end close. When it's the end of a biennium, we have a couple of special jobs. Mid-December, we have that encumbrance liquidation program that Alan just went over to liquidate encumbrances in the system. And then the job I'm going to be talking about is this biennium close program that we run on the last day of December. I think December 31st actually falls on a weekend this year, so we're going to be running it on the last business day of December. And this job goes in and inactivates prior biennium appropriation profiles on the 20 screen. So in R-Stars, if you go to the 20 screen, that is where appropriation profiles are set up. This job is going to go through and inactivate those at the close of the biennium for anything related to AY23 that has a December 31st end date. Next slide, please. So just some mechanics of the program. The profiles on the 20 screen, we have a screenshot of it here of what the 20 profile looks like. The program is saying if the AY is 23 and the effective end date is less than or equal to 12/31/2023, it's going to change the status to inactive. So you can no longer record any entries in SFMA against that AY23 appropriation. Next slide. So before 12/29, so that's the last business day of December when we're going to be running this, agencies need to make any final necessary entries for AY23. So we have the AY open for another 6 months to allow agencies to make any additional entries, to roll forward those document supported balances. So anything related to AY23 needs to be posted before 12/29, and any batches that use AY23 need to be completely cleared from the 530 screen. So we did have some information in our user group. There is a handout that provides some quick reference information on what agencies need to be thinking about at the end of December for the biennium closeout. So please take a look at that. If you have questions, let us know. But the things that you really need to be working on for biennium close, those document supported balances, rolling those forward or adjusting them. We have any accrued expenditures or outstanding encumbrances need to be cleared on the 62 screen for AY23 appropriations. I think that's a typo on there. If it's a capital construction appropriation, if your agency has been granted authority for capital construction, those are a little bit different because those appropriations stay open for 6 years. If you go on the 20 screen, they have an effective end date that's 6 years out. So those don't need to clear, but anything in balance type 17 and balance type 18 on the 62 screen needs to be closed out by the end of December. You'll get emails from your SFMS analyst if you still have balances that need to clear. We're monitoring that through November and December to make sure that's all zeroed out. If you have balance transfers, any of those that use AY23 need to be completed. If there's financial statement adjustments, those should be completed before AY23 closes. And if you've got any reconciliation entries for spots, deposits, anything that needs to be posted to AY23, it has to be done before December 10th. So making sure that any AY23 balances or batches have been cleared from the 530 screen, your SFMS analysts will be making sure any Y batches that produce from that encumbrance liquidation job get cleared. You want to release and confirm that any voucher payables have been cleared on the 530 screen if they use AY23. And highly recommend if you've got activity for AY23 that still needs to be reported, trying to enter it as soon as you can. We don't want to run into issues at the end of December. In case there's errors, give yourself some time to enter it to allow it to clear before that date. Payroll transactions, if they use AY23, also need to be completed. If you're doing retro corrections through Workday, those would have to be done before November payroll run 2 in order to come across. If you have information that comes over later with AY23, you're going to have to move it forward to AY25. So making sure that your 530 screen doesn't have those AY23 transactions. Right, next slide. If there is an AY23 transaction after December, it should be a very rare circumstance, but if it occurs, if it's a payroll batch or if it's a transaction that's going to have a budgetary impact, so if it's going to impact expenditures on the 62 screen for that appropriation, your Sabres analyst would have to approve that. So we're not going to open up appropriations after December without Sabres approval if there's a budgetary impact to it. There are some entries that can come after AY23. We could have system generated batches. We could have accrued revenue, deposit liability, some of those document supported balances. If they got missed and didn't get rolled forward, you would need to work with your SFMS analyst to resolve that. And we may, if all the criteria is met, be able to work with Sabres to temporarily activate an old appropriation for that transaction. Next slide. If you're one of those agencies that do run cost allocation, the December cost allocation runs in early January. If you had any December transactions that used AY23, it's possible you could have cost allocation, those C batch type batches air out. So if that happens, you would need to work with your SFMS analyst to be able to clear those AY23 transactions since the cost allocation won't run until January. Next slide. Again, if you have questions, contact your agency support analysts. We'll also be reaching out to you probably this week or next week with some more information on balances that we can see that need to clear, document supported balances that need to be rolled. So you will be having regular contact with your analysts from now until the end of December to try to make sure we've done everything that we need to in the system to close out the biennium. All right. Any questions on biennium close? Not seeing any, so I'm going to go forward to my last topic for today, is the DAFR 6610 agency operating statement. So in our user groups, we like to highlight DAFR reports just so agencies are aware that they're out there. I know at the beginning of the training, it sounded like there's kind of a mix. There's some people that have never used this report. There's some people that are using it just once a year for fiscal year end close. Some people are running it monthly. Oh, next slide, please. This is just a fund level statement of revenues, expenses, transfers, changes in retained earnings, fund balances, that operating statement view. This report, there's a couple different levels of the report or funds included. You can have a summary or detailed presentation. So when you're ordering the DAFR 6610 report, you can order it through the 91 screen. My next few slides are going to talk about how to order that report that way. There's also a copy of this report in the OB repository that you can run. And both of those options, you have the ability to set different filters or customizations for sorting the information in the way that you need. Next slide. So on the 91 screen, if you want to order the online PDF version of the DAFR 6610, you can order it to cover a specific AY, a current month, a prior year. There's a lot of different options on what time period you want this report to cover, and it can include a range of dates. So you can order the report on a specific date. You can set it to run once a month after every month end close. So there's some options to pick from. Next slide. You can also choose how data is going to be summarized. Is it going to be at the organization level? You can summarize it at the object level or the fund level. And all this information is in our report guide that's on our website for this report. If you need assistance ordering this report or have questions, your SFMS analyst can assist you with that also. Next slide. There are some special selection options for the DAFR 6610. You can limit by agency and appropriated fund. You can select the gap fund if you just want proprietary, governmental, or if you only want certain gap funds. You can have totals summarized, or you can have more detail. You can limit results to 8 or fewer funds within your selected type. Most of the time when I see agencies order this, they're leaving the special selects blank and just getting all of the information. But you do have the ability to customize it too if you're looking for just a specific subset of information. Again, looking at the RSTARS report guide, there's some more specifics of what you need to enter on the 91 report request profile to order this report. Next slide. This is what an example of what this report would look like. The information that's on here, this one's got it by the gap fund information. You can see information is organized by comp objects, and then we have totals for the total revenue, total expenditure, transfers in, transfers out. So in this example was requested for all funds at the D23 level by comp object and with summary totals. Next slide. I know a lot of agencies choose to order this report through the OB repository. This way you don't have to enter anything on the 91 screen. You can log into OB. You can go to the shared folders into the repository section, and you've got this option for the DAFR 6610 and 6620. So you can open that and run your report here as well, and it will have the same information. Next page. So if you have questions, let your agency support analyst know. If there's certain filters or options you want, let your agency analyst know that so they can help you figure out what special selects you might need if you're ordering it on the 91 screen in RStars. Okay, if there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, but I'm going to turn it over to Carlene.
Hi, let's talk about D23 fund requests updates. I'm getting a lot of them and I'm sending a lot back. So I just want to go over this. So the understanding in the agency for what I'm requesting is a little bit more clear. Let's talk about where I want you to put your legal legislation and or budgetary legislation notations. There is at the bottom of the form, kind of two-thirds of the way down, right below where you're putting any appropriation number that is being used against this in conjunction with this D23 is where I want this legal legislation. And this is the first element I review on the D23 form. It's going to be a House bill, a Senate bill that starts a new program or with any legal restrictions. Going forward, it would be a House or Senate bill that grants spending authority, and please include a section or a subsection if that is appropriate. An ORS e-board minutes, those will be coming up soon, I'm sure. Chapter law and or Oregon Constitution. All of those can be noted in this and are appropriate. Next. When we're talking about appropriation and appropriated fund, I'm getting several mismatches on this. If I send it back to you, what I'm looking for is please review the appropriation that you put on your report, on the request, as well as the appropriated fund on the request, and these should match. In this case, the appropriation fund number is 39501, and the appropriated fund on the request should be the 3020, as is linked to that appropriation number. That seems to be an issue getting that synced up. So anything should be, they should match. If it doesn't match, it's a mismatch, and I'll come back to you and say, I need you to correct this, please. Next. Cash fund, cash control, and the Treasury fund are all linked. The cash control actually is controlled through the D22 or the appropriated fund that we just talked about. So it can be 0 through 2, and the cash is 0 to 2. The cash fund field should not be populated. So if you have a 0, 1, or 2, no cash fund is needed. Please don't put it there. If there is one, I'm going to send it back and say, well, do you want the cash fund or do you want the if so, you need to change the cash control to 3. And is that supported by the appropriated fund as well? And cash funds should be attached to the Treasury fund requested on the D73 forms, and that Treasury fund needs to belong to the agency. So if you give me a cash fund or a D73 request form and that Treasury fund does not belong to your agency, I can't put it on that cash fund. And you can't name your own. You can name your own cash fund numbers, but your Treasury funds have to be assigned to your agency, or it just doesn't work. And please remember, cash funds are optional and they are the agency's decision to use. I'm not going to tell you, yes, you have to use them. No, you don't. I can let you know if your agency has any and have used them in the past, but I will never tell you, oh, you have to use them. I will direct you to the data entry guide regarding D73s and let you read up on them and let you know that they are how cash is viewed on the 63 screen. So it is just a user tool for the agency. But these are things in the last couple months that I've really come across and have some really have had long conversations with agencies with. So I just want to hit it. I know most of you are with me as far as how things need to go, but there is still seems to be some confusion at the agency level regarding these three elements of a D23. Next. SARS element for review. I will not comment on these as far as, please don't ask me. This is not my area of expertise. I will always send you to your SARS analysts to weigh in on it, and they are responsible for reviewing these three elements, which is Gap Fund, GASB 54, and the GASB 54 description. If the Gap Fund is 4,000, between 4,000 and 7,500, there is no GASB 54 indicator needed, therefore no description needs to be in place. But ultimately, these three fields are reviewed by the agency SARS analyst. Next. Okay, D23 changes to our D23 process. New for D23 requests affecting changes during review. Previously, SFMS had a policy where we would make changes up to 3 changes on a D23 request form from an agency just using an email, our email conversation. I would put that in as the backup for why I was making these changes. Effective today, November 7th, this practice is no longer being allowed. Any changes to any element discovered during the review process will mandate that an updated D23 request form is received from the agency. These elements include legal legislation, appropriated funds, local fund indicator, cash fund, cash controls, Treasury fund, appropriation funds, or D23 fund numbers. We do recommend that the agencies implement their own internal review process prior to submission, as this process could potentially impact turnaround time for SFMS review and request fulfillment. It's just really important that these come to me as clean as possible so that we can get through these reviews as quickly as possible. And we're finding the back and forth is becoming a bit onerous on this position. So that is why the change. Next. Okay, D23 trainings are available. We've had 2 of them this year that will go into far more depth than I just did. I just hit the highlights of the elements that seem to be somewhat of a bugaboo. It is on our SFMS website under trainings, and you look for D23 funds, and we've got the PDFs for the D23 fund basic training and D23 fund advanced training. We held these trainings in April and May of 2023. And we also have the YouTube recordings. I suggest printing out the PDFs of the trainings because they are a great desk manual. And but if you want to go and review the YouTube training, you certainly can. They are available. Next. Do you have any questions regarding what I just brought up for the D23s? And if you do, please email the d23.sfms@das.oregon.gov. This is where all D23 requests should go to and should be emailed to. You can CC my desk if you really feel you need to, but this really is it's a shared folder, it's a monitored folder, and this is really where we would like you to send them. So no questions, Loretta?
I am not seeing any questions in the chat here, Carlene.
Okay, let's talk about Treasury funds. Here again, I've been having a lot of conversations and a lot of questions from the agencies regarding setting up Treasury funds. So let's do a real quick review on that as well. How does an agency know that they need to request a new Treasury fund? Again, it all starts with the legislation. Legislation will contain the words separate and distinct from the general fund. It'll, generally speaking, also identify the agency that this Treasury fund needs to belong to. I've had a couple agencies try to set up Treasury funds where the legislation directed it actually at another agency. Legislation will also give you the title of your new Treasury fund, so it doesn't really allow a lot of creativity. Legislation may or may not direct where the interest will be earned. If it doesn't, please let me know that it doesn't direct the interest anywhere, and I know where to put it. Legislation also generally doesn't address where the fees are assessed, but that agency needs to choose where you want those fees to be credited to at the end of the month. Effective start date needs to be determined, and this the agency does. When does the agency expect the monies to be available or received is a great start off point. But it's critical to avoid fees when an open account at the end of the month, when no monies are received, and will result in a negative Treasury account balance at the end of the month. So I generally say don't try to put it in the last 5 days of the month, just in case the money does not arrive in a timely manner or when expected. And then you're not caught with fees going into that account and being assessed, and you've got a negative balance, and you're getting a nasty gram from Oregon State Treasury going, you've got a negative balance in your account, you need to address it. Next. How does an agency request a new Treasury fund? Is there a form? Currently, there is no form. I'm working on one. We were hoping to get one set up before this user group, but I was having some issues. Adobe sometimes just doesn't want to cooperate with what I want it to do. I want to make sure it's a fillable form. I think those are much easier to deal with. So currently there isn't a form. We are working on one, but agency needs to send these requests to D23 fund, to the d23.sfms@das@.oregon.gov with the following information. We do need the title of the D23 fund. We need the legal legislation that separate and distinct from general fund language. HB, House Bill, Senate Bill with the section and subsection if appropriate. Interest is earned, is it itself or it's not addressed? Then 99900760015 is the default. Fees paid, it's going to be itself or a different Treasury fund belonging to the agency. And then effective start date, when should this account be opened at Treasury? I need those 5 elements before it can be opened up at Treasury. I do a bit of due diligence and then I send the email to Treasury. What happens next? SFMS reviews the request and verifies the legislation. And if questions arise or if anything is missing, I will contact the agency immediately. SFMS is responsible for assigning the new Treasury fund number, so please don't send me a number that you would like it to be, because I have a very ordered number scheme that I am following currently, and it is working. But you will be notified of what that number is, because I will include you in the email to the Oregon State Treasury when I'm requesting that new D23 fund. All contacts that the agency has put on that request will be included in that on the CC line. So you will get that information as I'm setting this up. Okay, so what is the timeline for the request? Generally speaking, Oregon State Treasury has 5 days to review and request and open a new Treasury fund. Doesn't generally take that long. They've been really Johnny on the spot, but they do have up to 5 days. It does take 1 day to crosswalk over the new Treasury fund it happens during the nightly batch cycle into R-stars. It comes into a specific screen, and then that next day, once I receive that confirmation, And I confirmed that it has crosswalked successfully over into RStars. I finished the setup and I added to the D53 screen and the LFCW screen to RStars. At that point, so the normal turnaround day is about 3 to 4 days, but the process can take up to 7 or 8 days from the request to ready for inclusion on a D23. Next. Okay, basically, if you're talking to Treasury, we have discovered that there are some terminology differences that you need to be aware of. Where SFMS talks about Treasury funds and receipted accounts, Treasury knows these as agency accounts. Where we talk about suspense accounts, Treasury calls them Treasury accounts or TRS accounts. So just be aware that if you are talking to Treasury, they do have a slightly different terminology than SFMS does. So if you have any questions, please contact me. I'd be happy to talk about this. You can either call me at 971-900-9769, or you can reach me via my email of carlene.hancock@dasoregon.gov. Are there any questions?
There is one question, Carlene, in the chat from Olga. She's saying the DAFR 6610 report in OB still has current fiscal year as 23 and prior fiscal year as 22.
Oh, that sounds like a Liz question. So Liz, do you want to address that?
Yeah, Olga, you can input, you can just type in 24 and 23. I'll follow up. I don't know, Aaron, I think you're on the call. Aaron Wallace, is that something you would update, or do I need to ask SARS to make that update to that repository, OB repository report?
SARS is in charge of that report, so you need to contact them if you want that changed permanently.
Yeah, okay, so I will email SARS, Olga, to make that change. In the meantime, you can just type in 24 and 23 to run the report. And if you're having issues, please send me an email and I can take a look, because I know I've run that report recently without issue.
Okay, that was a great question though, Olga. Thank you for asking it. Okay, let's talk about 1099's process and timelines. As you know, tax season for a lot of us is hot on our heels. It's coming up quickly, more quickly than any of us really want. And I want to go through some of our processes and our timelines to help you through this season. So basically what I'm going to say is what the agency responsibilities are is, to start with, we have 2 electronic reports that come out monthly, and it's the DAFR 7940 and the DAFR NE 40. And for those of you who are new, the DAFR 7940 are any vendors that have payments specifically identified with number one, they need to be eligible to be reported to the IRS. So if they're not eligible to be reported, they're not going to be on either one of these reports. But the 7940 is associated with the 1099 miscellaneous information returns for that vendor. And the DAFR NE 40 is for the 1099 NEC information returns. Review these reports and address any identified changes or errors prior to the 1099s being printed and distributed. This year, this is being done on January 19th. We also want you to save the final copies of these 2 reports produced on the 12th, which is the December month end. During the nightly batch cycle, they will be produced. So the next day that you're in the office, please save these. They should be available electronically for your agency. Review the EO99 report, which comes out, which is produced on January 16th during the nightly batch cycle, so available for viewing on the 17th. And work with your internal payroll department for any W-2 adjustments or corrections that you identify. Generally speaking, you're looking at the travel reimbursement. So TA documents, because those are the ones that where they're paid before they actually go out. You need to make sure that the expenses are totally reconciled to those payments. Agency's responsibilities after January. We request that you respond to any and address any change requests sent to SFMS related to return 1099s. Respond to any email requests from SFMS due to vendor phone calls coming in. My phone number is on every single 1099 generated out of our stars for miscellaneous and an NEC. And ultimately, it is the agency's responsibility to correctly report 1099 information for the vendors they pay, even though SFMS, through our STAR system, does report these to the IRS and the DOR electronically. Next, SFMS responsibilities. We confirm that the electronic submission file meets IRS standards, and we make sure that 1099s are produced and distributed by the IRS by their due dates. We make sure agency directed manual changes received prior to received beginning January 17th through April 24th are made in the system and promptly mailed out per our schedule. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And we answer promptly any phone calls received from the vendor and direct any questions to the agency if we are unable to resolve the issue. I would say I have about a 90% rate of being able to resolve any questions coming through the vendors. But sometimes it really does have to fall on the agency to do a little bit more research and come back with an answer either to the vendor for why they are being reported as they're being reported, or you're sending a correction to me. Anyway, I print and adjust any adjusted or corrected 1099s throughout February and April, following a predetermined schedule, and we electronically file with the IRS and DOR also per the schedule. So DAFR 7940 and NE40 production schedule. Currently, the first electronic reports have been produced and are currently available online for your viewing. If you have any questions regarding how to access these, please reach out to me. I'm more than willing to help you get them. But October 13th was the first time it was generated. It's going to be generated on November 17th, with month-end close for October. We do it on December 29th, the last day of December, last working day of December on the 23rd. And then again, the very final one will be January 12th. It'll be produced with the nightly batch cycle for the December month-end close. SFMS does request that agencies save that report. I know I said it before, but please save these reports to use when addressing any vendor 1099 inquiries submitted by SFMS and for requesting any manual changes. The EO99 report, this is the one that seems to be the hardest to understand. Yes, please review this when you get it. It's basically employees who are paid with an IRS reportable comp object. Generally speaking, the ZE payment, you're looking at the ZE payment date, doc ID, and then it has all payments paid by the agency for calendar year 2023. This report is scheduled for January 16th, nightly batch cycle, and available the next morning for the agency to view. Okay, quickly to go over this, January is our big month for 1099s. So we have a lot of things going on the 12th, which is month end. This happens at night after December has been closed. It is the final date for any BT corrections using 415, 416 entries that impact tax year 2023. It is where we print the final DAFR 7940 and the final DAFR NE40. The 43M is populated in RStars, which is akin to what is the vendor going to be reported for and what box for a 1099 miscellaneous. The 43N is also populated, and that is for the 1099 NEC. The AO99 report has potential W-2 impacts, and that will be produced on the nightly batch cycle on 1/16. And on 1/16, manual change requests for 1099 impacts can begin to be received by my desk. You have about 3 days for that first printing. So it's a really quick turnaround. Final day for manual change requests is on the 18th. And then we are printing and mailing the 1099 MISCs and NECs on the 19th. And then on the 29th of January, I will be submitting the NEC file for the first time to the IRS. February, we have a couple of print dates that we have scheduled, which is on the 8th and the 22nd. It is our corrections for 1099 NECs. We will print and mail on the 8th. And miscellaneous they will be revised. They will not have the corrected, it won't show as a corrected 1099. It is just a revised 1099. And then the 1099 NEC again on the 22nd are the corrected, and then the MICs are the revised. And then on the 27th, I will send the first 1099 NEC correction file to the IRS. In March, we have again 2 printings scheduled. NEC or corrections on March 7th. 1099 miscellaneous revised will be printed and mailed also on the 7th. The NEC corrections on the 21st, revised on the 21st, and then NEC correction files will be sent on the 27th. And the first time the 1099 miscellaneous file will be submitted to the IRS is also on the 27th. So you notice that the miscellaneous file is sent to the IRS and DOR, frankly, for the first time at the end of March, due March 31st. So April, we are again doing, we're kind of getting the cleanups in April. We're doing everybody's a correction, and we're doing it on the 11th and 25th for printing. And then the 25th is the last planned print. So please be aware of that. And then the 29th, we are submitting both NEC and miscellaneous correction files to the IRS. This is the end of the 2023 planned 1099 production. So you have plenty of opportunities to make corrections and address vendor concerns. A lot of agencies don't receive any issues, so good job. I love you. But SFMS is making changes to the, just so you know, this has been a request for a number, ever since we went remote, frankly. SFMS is making change to the 1099 form, specifically how the vendor EIN and SSN is displayed. We have discovered that the IRS allows masking of the first 5 digits of the vendor's EIN and SSN. We were super thrilled to make this change, and it's going to allow greater security for when we mail out forms to vendors. But it also will allow SFMS to email copy requests to vendors versus using USPS, which can take up to 2 weeks for delivery. This will start with tax year 2023. I still cannot email anything prior. So 22 and earlier, we still have to mail those out. But starting in 2023, we can start making email copies to the vendors. I will ask that we don't do that until towards the end of February, because I do want them to be able to have the opportunity to receive their mailed copy. But certainly this is going to make a lot of people's lives a lot easier in the long haul. So, any questions? Okay.
Questions here in the chat, Carlene.
Okay, this is going to be a shameless plug. January 5th or December 5th, please not January 5th, December 5th, I am having a 1099 training. For a lot of you, I know it is review, but please attend. I always find that I lose a lot of the information. If I don't use it, I lose it. Or and with all of our lives being very, very busy, our desks being very, very busy, I believe everyone can spare about 2.5 hours to go through this training, just to remind you what your expectations are, or what the reports are doing, how things work in the system. I didn't really go over that in this training, and it will be up. I'm working on getting the presentation together, and we will send out an SFMS news blast letting you know when this training is on Workday and ready to be signed up for. And but please have your be looking for this in the next 2-3 weeks for sign up. Also, if you're a 1099 contact with your agency and have been pre-identified as such, I will be sending an email to you personally. Or if you know someone in your agency that needs this information, please feel free to send that information forward to them. So thank you for your time, and happy 1099 season.
Hey, good morning. So after all that complex information comes to you, let's just take a break and go through some slow and easy subject. Next, please, Rita. Okay, let's talk about 44 screen. This screen is useful if you have your warrant number and you are wondering about the status or information related to your warrant. So simply on 44 screen, you are typing the warrant number and hit enter, and you can see the information such as a document that posts that warrant, the amount, status, date, pretty much most of the information you need about the warrant. Next, please. So that is the simple scenario. You have the warrant number and you just go to 44 screen and look it up. But another scenario will be you do not have the warrant number, but you know which document number is related to it. So on 86 screen, you will just put your document number. And one thing you need to pay attention, it is your payment number. If it starts with 1, that's the warrant. But if it starts with 95, that's the ACH payment. Next, please. And when you drill down on 86 screen, you can see your payment number or warrant number and take it back to 44 screen if you need to see the status of is it paid or not. And slide, please. And other scenario, other screen would be looking at 47 screen, which is payment control table status. Again, kind of same information, different views, different layout. And so we'll tell you the warrant number, cancel, if that was the cancel date or paid status, we'll clarify that, what date warrant was issued, and the amount. And obviously you have that vendor information, but we crossed it for the security purposes. Next slide, please. And when we talk about status, like you want to look at the 44 screen or 47 screen, that's what you're looking at. If you see status is C, that means that warrant was canceled. If it is E, that warrant was expired. If it is I, it is issued, but nothing is processed yet. If it is P, warrant was paid. And if it's S, that means warrant was stopped. Next, please. Any questions? Again, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about your warrant or payments. Thank you.
Maria, we do
Next
have a
slide,
question.
please. Oh, go ahead.
What is the bank microfilm number?
Which screen? Can you slide back, see which screen was that? One more. Did you see on the 44 screen or 47 screen?
It's here on the 47 screen. On the very bottom right here, the bank microfilm number.
I think that's what US Bank so when information interface to our system through the bank, I think that's that tracking number between bank and our transaction to clarify for them. Because the information when warrant is processed, when warrant is paid, we receive the file, we receive the data from the bank every day to go to our system and post that as a paid if warrant was paid. So then we will have system generated transaction to clear that warrant as a paid. Does that answer your question?
Follow-up question is, can we provide that information to vendor to track the money?
I'm not sure about that. Please send me an email. Let me clarify that with bank, and I will get back to you on that.
And then
I'm not sure what level of security is that information. If okay, it's multiple. I see that. Because the check copy from Treasury, the request form requires the microfilm number. Okay. I occasionally send a copy of the 44 screen to a vendor to show that the payment was issued and cleared. They see the title of single payment cancellation and they think the payment has been canceled. And I tell them to ignore the title and let them know that the payment was actually made. So 44 screen is had that title. Pretty much it's the way we use the 44 screen. So if we received a stop pay or cancel request form from agencies, we go to 44 screen in order to cancel the warrant or stop the warrant. And then when we post that, then you can see that on the 44 screen as well. So if that creates confusion, yeah, I think that would be just clarified with vendor that title is not necessarily is canceled. If it is paid, status will be pay. Would be P, sorry. I hope
and then Mila has
answered your
no
question.
but she's wondering if we could share your presentation sheet.
Shared. So all these user group training materials we'll post in our website. We will send out the SFMS news email and let you know that presentation was posted in our website. Then yeah, we will have this in our website. Any other question?
Looks like no other questions.
Okay, thank you.
Well, good morning. Looks like I'm going to end the training today. My name's Aaron Wallace, and I'm going to be talking about the Datamart Calendar. And I hope most of you are aware that it actually exists and is updated around November timeline. It's located on the Datamart website, which has recently updated as well. So please remember the URL that's shown on the slide. You can also get to the website really easy by just Googling Oregon Datamart, and I'll be the first site on the list that pops up. So we are going to visit the site really quick, and I wanted to alert you of a bit of information off of it. So I'm going to quickly share my screen, take over here. Hopefully you can all see that okay. And so here's the new site. Got quite a few little things that have updated, and I just wanted to show you just a few of the tabs that we're looking at. Want to make sure you're looking at the OB, IEE, or OB1 tab. That's really great information all about OB, and just training. Everything you can think about OB is going to be on that site or on that tab. So that's a really good one to check out. The next two on this list are all about security, and the first tab there is the security access, which would be talking about OB1 and getting access there. The second one is actually talking about RACF security access. So when you use other programs to view the Datamart. So both of those, if you're looking for security, that's where you'll want to go. The next tab on that list is, of course, training, and that tab is just a great tab that shows you a lot of stuff that we mainly have everything in Workday Learning now. So if you need training, you can go out there and watch the videos and do it anytime you need to. So you can get a lot of great information about the Datamart as well as OB1. Next, I want to drop down just a little bit before I get into the payroll calendar, in the processing calendar, and that is this new tab we put in called Workday Tables. This one's a really good one that has now all the information about the new Workday tables, which have been very wanted lately, and they want to know all about them. And so you can click on the links here and learn a little bit more, as well as training. So those are some great information that you need to go ahead and check out. Okay. And finally here, we want to talk about the processing calendar tab, which is what we're talking about today, of course. And it's got a lot of great information about when the Datamart's actually loaded with new data throughout the year. And as you may notice here, we don't actually have the 2024 calendar up there quite yet. We are putting the finishing touches on it, so just bear with me, and we'll get that out there soon. Now, however, I wanted to give you a little sneak peek and make sure you are aware of what it can provide. So let me jump over to that really quick and show you. There you are. Hopefully that's a decent size for you. So first off, we have the Datamart load process. Now, this is very important because this actually consists of 3 days. Now, it starts on Friday evening. As you can see here, there's actually an extract on Friday evening. So our tech guy goes in there, extracts SFMA and Orbit's data or budget data out of the systems. And then he on Saturday takes that information and it's then uploaded into the Datamart. Now that process starts sometime Saturday, but then it doesn't complete until a varying time on Sunday. So you need to be very, very careful that when you're trying to work over the weekends, if you are so ambitious that you're working on the weekend, that you will more than likely not be able to retrieve data because the Datamart is down during these load processes. So you will want to probably wait until Monday morning when the information is available again. And you can see it's totally available on the Monday morning here. Now, I do also come in early Monday morning and verify that the load worked properly. And if not, we will alert the Datamart news list of any issues. So just be aware of that. Okay. Now, another thing on the calendar that we want to make sure you're aware of is the Workday loads. or payroll load dates, which consist of 2 a month. So we have the run 1, which is normally at the end of the month, and then we have the run 2, which is around the 10th or the 13th. So you can see here, January is going to be on the 10th, and we got the 30th here for the run 1 for January. Now, just be careful. We do have a word called retro in here, and that's just, we call the run 2 retro. But yeah, so those dates are subject to change, and I think actually I am going to be changing some of them because Workday team has asked for a little bit more time for those to get loaded. Now, we will have the report effective date file come out as well, and I'll post that on my website. That will show you what actual filtering you should be doing to pull up those exact dates, because normally, even if it's loaded like on the 10th, we'll have a report effective date on the 9th. Just depending. And I think Workday is asking me to have an extra day, so it'll be probably moved to the 11th, and then still the report effective date the 9th, more than likely. But again, those are subject to change, and those are the things we're finalizing with the Workday team right now. So some additional information that you want to look at that you don't want to forget are the SFMS close dates, of course. And so we have the December RSTARS close here on the 12th of January. And of course, each month will have another close date. Now, you can, of course, go to the SFMS calendar, which is very nice and shows you those great close dates as well. But they are actually on the Datamart calendar too. Some more great dates to look at are the YE SFMA loads, which only occur during a specific time frame. Let me get to it really quickly here. Starting in July. Right after RSTARS June closes, we then hit month 13, and that's when we start to provide you a little bit more data on a little more frequency. And that'll actually be 3 times a week, as you'll see here on the 22nd. It'll start the year-end updates, and then the 24th and the 26th. So, excuse me, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We do load the YE or year-end information to help with that month 13 year-end. And that will just be the YE tables that will be loaded with new data. So all the regular tables like the all accounting event and that kind of thing will not have new information during the week. They'll do the standard loads over the weekend. But if it has the YE in the name of the table, which we have 3 different ones, the YE active accounting event, the YE all accounting event, those kind of things, those will have the new information 3 times a week. And that'll run all the way through month 13 into August here. As you can see, month 13 closes on the 16th of August. And that's when our final run happens. Now, not only does that run happen there, but then we stop doing that. And then 1 week later, on the 24th, we will have the YE tables cleared. So the rest of the year, actually from that date all the way to the very next year until month 13 happens again, there will be no data in the YE tables. So you will only want to use these YE tables during this specific month 13 timeframe. Okay. So now, of course, I said dates may change. We are working through them just a little bit more, and we'll get that out there finalized here within the month. So be looking at that. And if there is any changes throughout the year, I will send out the information over the Datamart news list. And let me show you this real quick. If you're not signed up for the news list on my website, over here on the left-hand side, they do have news lists. And so you want to click there and go to signing up for the news list, and you can subscribe to the Datamart news. You can also do it to the SFMS news as well if you're not on that. So we do have the subscription. Now, I know this was brief, but I hope you gathered a little bit of information about the Datamart calendar. So thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask now.
Not showing any questions here, Aaron.
Thank you.
All right, so that was our presentation for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to get the final tally from Scott. Scott, do you have our numbers of our opening question before we conclude?
Indeed, I do. Would you
Yes.
prefer I type it in the chat or say it right now?
You can say it right now. That's fine.
All right. 58 people voted for dog, 38 for cat, 6 for other. I counted birds and chickens as birds for the purposes of other. 2 people voted for rabbits, 1 for snake, 1 for horses. 12 people said it's their first time I'm at this kind of meeting, but the counting is a little bit wonky on that because as when the report question came up, I might have accidentally added and subtracted a few tallies from that. But as for the 6610 report, 10 people said yes, they use it every day. 16 people said no, they do not use it every day.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, well, hopefully you do get to use it in the future. So I just want to wrap up our training and tell you that we wish you guys happy holidays. We will see you again in February of 2024. So from our SFMS family to yours, have a great holiday season and we will see you soon. Thank you guys. And I'm going to stop recording.